Sheryl, after your last record, you have said that you are not planning on releasing full-length albums anymore. So my first question is, when you started writing without the idea of having necessarily to do a full-length record, did that in a way take away a bit of the pressure, if there was any pressure in your songwriting process for records? And did you feel a certain ease doing so?
Well, I knew I would be asked if I put out an album about having said that. And I wasn't really thinking about putting a record out, except for I had written, or I was writing, after writing Evolution and writing Broken Record. And I had all these things I was writing about, and it was very of the moment. And um, I contacted my very dear old friend Mike Elizondo, who's a brilliant producer, and I said, I have these songs. I don't want to produce myself. Um, I have, six, seven songs. Would you listen to them and see if you're interested in creating some cinematography around them? And he loved them. And then we wound up writing a couple together and actually digging out something we'd written 20 years ago. And so I wound up at the end of the day having like 9 or 10 songs and felt like, okay, this is a collection of songs. For me, it wasn't like making an album where I was curating a journey from the beginning to the middle to the end, with this vision. It was just a whole bunch of songs, almost like a playlist, putting out songs all at the same time. I do still stand by my belief that making albums at this point, at least in my career, is a kind of a colossal waste of time and money, because no one's going to listen to them in your emotional structure that you've created. They're going to cherry pick, and it's going to wind up on playlists with other artists that you might not even like. Um, but this just felt like the right thing to do. Just put them all out on a single day, and call it an album.
When you talk about that nobody listens to records as a whole anymore, is there a certain feeling of being disillusioned in this? Do you think really nobody listens to records anymore in the way that the artist intends to?
Yeah, I love the fact that young people are getting into vinyl. I do. I love that. To me, I don't spend time being disillusioned by it, because the reality is the toothpaste is already out of the tube. We can't go back and say, okay, instead of you going through something and listen to 6 seconds or maybe a minute of it, we're going to make you listen to a 5.5 minute song. That's not going to be the reality anymore. You know, we can talk about AI and programming and algorithms. Well, we are actually the ones who are being programmed. We've been programmed, and now we are a different machine. So the reality of spending time being disillusioned by it is a bit of a waste of time, but there are things at this point that I feel passionate about, and that is fighting for the rights of artists where AI is concerned, fighting for the rights of artists where subscription agencies are concerned, where the artist gets paid fractions of a penny, while those that own the algorithms are making a shit ton of money. That there is still, as far as being disillusioned, there are things that are not right, that are disillusioning to me, and there are things I can work to better, but I can't go back and make people listen to an album when I put it out.
In your speech, in your induction speech for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame last year, you said you were a kid who dreamed rock and roll, who poured over album covers, who knew the name of every musician on the record. Do you think kids nowadays or young people still have that experience of consuming music, about like checking out all the names, all the details on the records, or do you think that's an art form that's lost?
Oh, I think that's a lost art form. I mean, for me to go on, I go on to like, I can't even remember what the sites are, to find out who produced something and who played on something. And it's it's like a rabbit hole you have to go down to figure out who's played on what. And it's, I don't know that it's even in the consciousness that there are people coming in and playing their beautiful art form into your music. Do you know? For me, I think about my career and I think of all the people that have brought to my music that very special thing that they do, and that is what lent itself to my having a sound that I have. And for me now, I go on and I look up, who wrote something, and there'll be 18 writers on something, and I'll look up who played on it, and it's just it's impossible, and I don't know that people care anymore. um and that's also, I mean, that's the nature of it. For me though, being in a tiny town where we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have um MTV, there was no cable. You lived in a bubble, and what was outside of that bubble came to you through records and through album covers and through Cream and Rolling Stone and Teen Beat, and and it was all dreamlike, and you were reaching for that dream.
Before you started your solo career, you also were a session musician, like a studio musician, singing background vocals, which is, I was wondering, do you still have, as you live in Nashville, which is the perfect place for this, do you still have contact to that scene? And as you mentioned, the changes in the music industry, is that scene still existing in that way?
Yeah, I mean, I sing on people's records. Other people come in and sing on my records. I've hired backup singers. I mean, the McCrary sisters are, I mean, they've been around since the 70s, sang with Bob Dylan, and they still come in and they'll do sessions, and it is a beautiful exchange of a spiritual art form, and I love it. And Nashville is an incredible place because you have some of the finest musicians who've been around historically for a long time, but also they're in every genre of music, from country music to rock and roll to pop music. And I love that. And I'm still in contact with lots of people that I used to work with and that I tour with. They're like family. People on the Michael Jackson tour are still very much a part of my life. So I am grateful that I got to be, a side guy, a side musician.
So I suppose that's a very good school for then proceeding to be the leading woman, having that foundation as the side woman, side woman.
I loved it, and I still feel, I still feel that pull to musicians who live in that world. I grew up with parents who came home with a whole bunch of musicians, and that was what introduced me to music, was that your friend group that you gravitated to were people that listened to music and that played along and that learned the same tunes, or that played in the top 40 band with you. And um, you share in something, when you're in a room with musicians, you share in a sort of an understanding and a set of references that have formed you.
You've mentioned Mike Elizondo, obviously, who produced the record, but you've been making music with him, sorry, for a long time. Can you talk a bit about your working relationship and how he, as a producer, contributed to that record?
Well, my working relationship is really influenced by my friendship with him. I mean, I have a lot of admiration for him. Obviously, he was one of the architects of Dre and Eminem, but he's got this incredible musicianship to him that goes far beyond programming. But then there's the person, and I think the person is really what, to me, informs the cinematography of what he does. So when I called him, we go all the way back from before his kids were born, and he's got a 23-year-old, and way before my kids were born. And so we have this history. One of the first things that I thought was, I want to do this song by Peter Gabriel because it means so much to me. I've spent a lot of the last few years trying to figure out how to navigate the world that I don't understand and still hold true to who I am. And that's what that song means to me, digging in the dirt, watching the nature of people change, and not having an understanding of how to model beauty and empathy to my two young boys, So I called him and said, I want to do Digging in the Dirt, and I've got these songs, and I don't want to sit in the studio and try to figure out how to blow my own mind. I want somebody else to take these songs and create a world for me. And it was a gift that I gave myself. I mean, I literally gave myself the gift of letting go of the control of my record. And I put it in the hands of somebody I love and trust. And it was joyous.
It's interesting you said the word cinematography. So is the producer, or was the producer's role in that sense, the role of a cinematographer?
Yeah, I mean, I even told him, I said, I feel like I'm handing you these little scripts. And I'm hiring you as my Martin Scorsese, you know, to create a world around them. And the beauty of it is, and I think, you know, it is a good illustration. The beauty of music, if you don't put, you know, if you don't do a video to it or whatever, it's very old school for someone to listen to it and relate to it and how it relates to that person, and how do our stories overlap with these words and the feel of these intervals and these chords, and to let him take that. I mean, he literally took my demos and built a world around them. I mean, some of the stuff I didn't even re-sing or replay. And there's something beautiful about that, you know. There was also an exercise in that for me in letting go of my control, because every record I've made, I have played or created, or, you know, I've tracked and been inside of all of the machinations of it. And this was like, okay, here's the script, see what you can do with it. And then walking in and watching it, you know, he would play me what he'd done, and I would just be washed over with this beautiful environment he created.
So learning to let go in some aspects in those regards.
Yeah, I mean, learning and exercising, letting go, and feeling okay about that. You know, I think sometimes as an artist, I think define who you are. I've defined myself as somebody who plays a lot of instruments. I'm not the greatest player, but that lends itself to my sound and my direction, and it's brought the quirk to what I do. Well, this was different than that. This was saying, okay, I'm more than that. I'm actually the product of my life. I'm the product of my life experience. And I wrote those little stories and said, okay, somebody else that I love and trust, let's see what you do with my experience in relationship to who you are.
When you started writing the songs and the lyrics, what kind of mindset did you have? I mean, the record is introspective, but there's also hedonistic elements on it, so to say. It's very colorful. So yeah, what was your mindset when you started working on it?
Well, you know, there are some really heavy themes on the record, and I hope people will come away from it feeling like they've, you know, every song has not only hope, but it feels good. It's fun. You know, there's a lot of up stuff, but you know, every song has an experience behind it. AI is definitely based on my absolute fear of what this is going to mean, not just for artists. I mean, I've already seen what it's meaning for artists. I got to hear John Mayer sing a demo that he had absolutely nothing to do with, and you would not be able to tell the difference in whether he recorded it or whether it was an AI version. That right there is terrifying to me, because at a certain point we won't know what truth is. We won't know what authenticity is. We might not even be able to define what is spirit led, soul led, or what is machine calculated. But so the song is delving into that selfishly, is what is this going to mean for me as an artist, but also the broader sense of what is it going to mean to our humanity, when we can't trust anything or anyone. And yeah, so we made it. That was what what made me want to walk down the driveway to my studio and write this song, and play it and send it to Mike. And same with Broken Record, you know, the idea that you can lift your voice into the world of social media and receive total abject hate from people, and also love from people, um, based on I'm right and you're wrong. We can't, you know, it asks the question, can we still love each other but disagree? All these things for me are so immediate, and the only thing I can do with the immediacy of how I feel is the only thing I know, which is to write about it. You know, I can preach all day long, but it falls on deaf ears if we're already programmed to believe we're right and the other person's wrong. So for me, going into the studio and picking up a guitar or sitting at the piano, that's my safe place. And that's where I can let go of everything.
Because you just mentioned social media, are you glad that you got big or got like established as an artist before the whole social media thing came up? Because I think for artists establishing themselves nowadays, that's quite a different situation.
Well, I could most definitely say I would not be doing this if I had to come up now, because so much of it, I mean, I would say 85% of it revolves around self-promotion, and I was never good at that. In fact, I probably was the person who believed least in myself of all the people around me, and still grapple with that, you know. So promoting myself, and particularly revealing, you know, trying to make myself appear perfect and beautiful, is so antithetical, I think, to being a sensitive artist who already is like, "Rah," you know, nervous about revealing anything. Um, I think that's sort of what's demanded of our artists today. In fact, it's interesting because I've been working with a young artist who writes really great stuff, but every record label says, well, they don't have any social media following. So you have to have it even before you become big now. And I wouldn't have been able to stomach that. But it is the nature of the beast, so I'm not going to change it.
How did you experience your own fame when it all really got huge? How was things for you? How were things for you then?
Um, you know, I didn't have any sort of gauge for it. You know, I didn't know if it was terrible or if it was great. I could only react to it from my personal experience, and there were some things that were just unbelievably mind-blowingly incredible. Like the fact that I could have a song like All I Want to Do Is Have Some Fun resonate with people all the way from Bogota, Colombia to um, uh, Tokyo to Tel Aviv. I mean, I got to go to places in my entire life I would never have dreamt of because of the success of an oddball song. But there were other things that were also hard for me. And, you know, talking about social media, I think the things that were hard for me back then were the fact that you could have people listen to your record and decide that you weren't good, or, you know, like just being reviewed and being set up to be torn down. That's just the nature of becoming well known. I can't imagine doing it now where, you know, the knee jerk is always to not like somebody. And so, you know, you grapple with the good and the bad, but there's no handbook for life, you know. I think the reality of it is, for me, is that the safe place for me is nature, and then outside of that, what is people's opinions and all that is just part of the mist of nonsense that isn't relative, to being alive. You know, it's not relevant.
So the nature is your refuge if you want to get rid of all that.
Yeah, oh yes. I mean, it is the place where I find God. It's the place where I can hear myself. Um, it is the most beautiful and holistic distraction, um, of anything. You know, it's the place I hear myself. It's the place where, when I'm with my boys, that we are truly present with each other. It's a salve, you know, it's a healing quotient.
And can you get rid of the songwriter bit in your brain when you're out and about in the nature?
Oh yeah, you know, it is funny because as a once I began writing and producing, I started listening to music as a scholar, you know, as a student basically. And I still will listen to music and get into the machinations of it, which can totally rob you of the experience of being present and going, oh, what does this feel like? What does this mean, you know, to me? And so, yeah, I mean, nature, I can actually go out for a jog and listen to music and feel the music and not have that listener's discerning ear going because I'm seeing trees and weird little things along the way, just noticing while having a soundtrack going. And there's no better way to listen to music to me.
So you can silence the intellectual music analyst in your brain a little bit and feel the thing instead of analyzing it.
All you have is breath and surroundings. And, you know, that's the whole thing. That's life.
How's your songwriting process like when you are working on a project or in general? Do you write specifically for projects, albums, whatever? Or are you constantly writing? And how does a regular work day in your life look like if there's such a thing?
Well, you know, now that I'm uh I guess how do I say this? I've been around so long, I don't approach my career or my music business part of it um, in any way, shape, or form like when I was young and trying to write songs that filled out a body of work. You know, you had your introspective songs, and then of course you had to answer the call for having singles and staying relevant and being fresh and all that stuff. To me, writing now is something I do out of necessity. It's something I do out of feeling like I have something I need to say. I need to make some understanding of it without the consciousness that, okay, how am I going to produce this and who's going to hear it and how do I appeal to this demographic? I'm sort of not in the position to even think those things anymore because of my age, I'm not going to get played at what I call youth formats, and also um, because of technology, you know, and algorithms and all that sort of thing. For me, writing is more, it's something I do. It's an extension of 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 who I am, and but it's also something that gives me the opportunity to unload some of what I see and feel and try to make sense of it. And then when I go in the studio, you know, I just try and get it down and then build around that.
But when you imagine Threads would have been the last record in your career, I mean, how was the feeling to think, okay, this will be the final long player probably, even if I'm gonna continue touring and releasing music, but it's kind of it's a big thing to say, okay, this will probably be the last. So how does the thought of okay, this is the last record feel to you?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it felt really liberating to be able to say that, especially after the experience of standing in the recording booth with Johnny Cash in my ear and singing the song and feeling the weight of that and knowing that making records is not it's not what it was. And he sort of that whole experience kind of put uh you know, the finishing touches on what I feel like has been a beautiful and all-encompassing career. But now we're at a place where, you know, we're basically putting out sound bites and and everything is so, you know, 24-hour news, you know, everything is so immediate and so fleeting that you think, why spend a year working on something and writing about what's happening right now, and then it comes out a year later, and does it hold the pertinence? Does it have the, does it feel, does it hold the juice that you felt when you wrote it? And why hold on to it? Why not just put it out when now we're just listening to songs anyway? And that feeling and that decision was very liberating for me, and it still is. I mean, I feel like because I wrote all of these songs sort of around the same time period, all these songs are immediate to me, and they are very immediate to what's happening right now. It just so happens that some of these topics that are in this song aren't going to get fixed in the next year or 10 years. So would they be immediate a year from now? Yes, but for me right now, they are timely. And so I'm just putting them all out.
You've been an influence for so many singer-songwriters and musicians. Phoebe Bridgers covered your music. Soccer Mommy, I mean, there's plenty. Olivia Rodrigo. How do you feel when your colleagues come to you and say how big of an influence you have been on their careers?
It's really, I mean, first of all, it's really, really flattering. I mean, there's a catalog of women that influenced me and brought me to where I am, from Linda Ronstadt to Emmylou Harris to Stevie Nicks to Bonnie Raitt. And were it not for them, I would definitely not be doing what I'm doing. So to hear that is, I mean, that's a gift. That's a total gift, to know that you brought something to somebody else's life that was positive. So I love that. You know, that being said, those women are also the ones that are inspiring me. I mean, I love Boy Genius. I love Phoebe. I've gotten to know Olivia. I listen to her music, knowing her now, and she's brilliant. There's so many young artists that are inspiring me to keep going, you know, so it's wonderful.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much for taking the time. And I really loved listening to the record start to finish. And I'm sure that a lot of people will also be very glad to have the record to listen to in its entirety.
I'm glad you listened to the whole thing. That makes me happy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too.
Take care. Bye.